Dario, you have 2 minutes. Like, should we do thing A or thing B on this, like, someone gives me this random, half page memo and is like, should we do A or B? And I'm like, I don't know, I have to eat lunch. Let's do B. And that ends up being the most consequential thing ever.
Side of this too. If you don't do what Peter just said, when you see the next couple of slides on job loss coming up, you are going to be crushed if you're not part of this. Unless you're a really good electrician or a really good salesperson, you're probably immune. Or you work for the government.
There's two roles in the future.
You're probably
there's
immune.
2 roles in the future. There's the entrepreneur and there's the employee, and one of those will not exist.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's the creator and the consumer, right? I can't hit, I keep on telling my kids this every single day. Instead of consuming YouTube videos and video games, please start creating. What do you dream about?
Whereas I think that there's a pretty good chance that by 2050, the world will look as different from today as today does from like the hunter-gatherer era. Like it's like 10,000 years of progress rather than 25 years of progress, driven by AI automating all intellect.
Większość z nas postrzega rozwój sztucznej inteligencji jako serię gadżetów i ciekawostek. Ale dla ludzi budujących tę technologię to nie jest ewolucja. To fizyka, która nabrała przerażającego tempa. Dario Amodei, współzałożyciel i CEO Anthropic, to człowiek, który odszedł z OpenAI, by budować bezpieczniejszą alternatywę. Ale jego prognozy są dalekie od uspokajających. Według niego nie budujemy po prostu lepszych chatbotów. Budujemy coś, co roboczo nazywa państwem geniuszy zamkniętym w centrum danych. W dzisiejszej analizie zajrzymy za kulisy Scaling Hypothesis, brutalnej lekcji, która mówi, że w świecie AI spryt programisty znaczy coraz mniej, a surowa moc obliczeniowa i skala to absolutnie wszystko. Czy jesteśmy gotowi na świat, w którym najważniejsze decyzje dla ludzkości zapadają w przerwie na lunch, a dystans między nami a nadludzką inteligencją skurczył się do zaledwie kilkunastu miesięcy? Zapraszam na głęboką analizę mechanizmów, które już teraz zmieniają definicję pracy, bezpieczeństwa i samej cywilizacji. Wielka chmura obliczeniowa zastępuje ludzki spryt. Wielu ekspertów wciąż szuka przełomu w nowych algorytmach i błysku geniuszu w kodzie. Dario Amodei stawia jednak inną diagnozę. To surowa skala, a nie wyrafinowana architektura jest kluczem do wszystkiego. Poznajcie 7 filarów hipotezy, która zmieniła kierunek rozwoju Doliny Krzemowej.
What is the scaling hypothesis at this point?
Yeah, so I have actually the same hypothesis that I had even all the way back in 2017. So in 2017, I think I talked about it last time, but I wrote a doc called the Big Blob of Compute Hypothesis. And it wasn't about the scaling of language models in particular. When I wrote it, GPT-1 had just come out, right? So that was, one among many things, right? Back in those days, there was robotics. People tried to work on reasoning as a separate thing from language models. There was scaling of the kind of RL that happened, kind of happened in AlphaGo, and that happened at Dota at OpenAI, and people remember StarCraft at DeepMind, the Alpha Star. So it was written as a more general document, and the specific thing I said was the following. It's very, Rich Sutton put out the bitter lesson a couple years later, but the hypothesis is basically the same. So what it says is all the cleverness, all the techniques, all the kind of we need a new method to do something like that doesn't matter very much. There are only a few things that matter, and I think I listed 7 of them. One is like how much raw compute you have. The other is the quantity of data that you have. Then the third is kind of the quality and distribution of data, right? It needs to be a broad distribution of data. The fourth is, I think, how long you train for. The fifth is you need an objective function that can scale to the moon. So the pre-training objective function is one such objective function, right? Another objective function is, the kind of RL objective function that says, like, you have a goal, you're going to go out and reach the goal. Within that, of course, there's objective rewards, like you see in math and coding, and there's more subjective rewards, like you see in RL from human feedback, or kind of higher order versions of that. And then the sixth and seventh were things around kind of like normalization or conditioning, like, just getting the numerical stability so that kind of the big blob of compute flows in this laminar way instead of running into problems. So that was the hypothesis, and it's a hypothesis I still hold. I don't think I've seen very much that is not in line with that hypothesis. And so the pre-training scaling laws were one example of kind of what we see there. And indeed, those have continued going.
90% szans na cyfrową cywilizację do 2035 roku. Prognozy dotyczące nadejścia AGI często brzmią jak wróżenie z fusów, ale tutaj operujemy na twardym rachunku prawdopodobieństwa. Amodei wyjaśnia, dlaczego jest niemal pewien, że w ciągu dekady sztuczna inteligencja osiągnie poziom ekspercki w niemal każdej dziedzinie oraz co musiałoby się stać, by ten scenariusz uległ opóźnieniu.
Or that within human lifetime learning is like in these models, and why think that it's 1 year away and not 10 years away?
I actually think of it as like there's kind of two cases to be made here, or like two claims you could make, one of which is like stronger and the other of which is weaker. So I think starting with the weaker claim, when I first saw the scaling back in 2019, I wasn't sure. This was this was kind of a 50-50 thing, right? I thought I saw something that was, and my claim was this is much more likely than anyone thinks it is. Like, this is wild. No one else would even consider this. Maybe there's a 50% chance this happens. On the basic hypothesis of, as you put it, within 10 years, we'll get to, what I call kind of country of geniuses in a data center. I'm at like 90% on that. And it's hard to go much higher than 90% because the world is so unpredictable. Yeah. Maybe the irreducible uncertainty would be if we were at 95%, where you get to things like, I don't know, maybe multiple companies have, kind of internal turmoil and nothing happens, and then Taiwan gets invaded and like all the fabs get blown up by missiles and then
now you're into scenario.
Yeah. You could construct a scenario where there's like a 5% chance that you can construct a 5% world where like things get delayed for 10 years. That's maybe 5%. There's another 5%, which is that I'm very confident on tasks that can be verified. So I think with coding, I'm just, except for that irreducible uncertainty, I think we'll be there in 1 or 2 years. There's no way we will not be there in 10 years in terms of being able to do it end-to-end coding. The one little bit of fundamental uncertainty, even on long time scales, is this thing about tasks that aren't verifiable, like planning a mission to Mars, like, doing some fundamental scientific discovery like CRISPR, like, writing a novel. Hard to verify those tasks. I am almost certain that we have a reliable path to get there, but like, if there was a little bit uncertainty, it's there. So on the 10 years, I'm like, 90%, which is about as certain as you can be. Like, I think it's crazy to say that this won't happen by 2035. Like, in some sane world, it would be outside the mainstream.
Komputer w rękach. Hej, ostatnia bariera zatrudnienia. Czym różni się statyczny model językowy od realnego pracownika? Odpowiedzią jest umiejętność obsługi interfejsu. Zrozumienie, jak sztuczna inteligencja uczy się używać komputera tak jak człowiek, pozwala dostrzec moment, w którym maszyna przestaje być asystentem, a staje się autonomicznym specjalistą.
But let me ask it in a very specific question so that we can figure out exactly what kinds of capabilities we should expect soon. So maybe I'll ask about it in the context of a job I understand well, not because it's the most relevant job, but just because I can evaluate the claims about it. Take video editors, right? I have video editors. And part of their job involves learning about our audience's preferences, learning about my preferences and tastes and the different trade-offs we have, and how just over the course of many months building up this understanding of context. And so the skill and ability they have 6 months into the job, a model that can pick up that skill on the job, on the fly, when should we expect such an AI system?
Yeah, so I guess what you're talking about is like, we're doing this interview for 3 hours, and then like someone's going to come in, someone's going to edit it. They're going to be like, oh, I don't know, Dario, like, scratched his head, and, we could edit that out, and,
magnify that.
There was this like long discussion that like is less interesting to people. And then there's other thing that's like more interesting to people. So, let's kind of make this edit. So, I think the country of geniuses in a data center will be able to do that. The way it will be able to do that is, it will have general control of a computer screen, right? Like, and you'll be able to feed this in, and it'll be able to also use the computer screen to like go on the web, look at all your previous interviews, like look at what people are saying on Twitter in response to your interviews, like talk to you, ask you questions, talk to your staff, look at the history of kind of edits that you did, and from that, like, do the job.
Yeah.
So I think that's dependent on several things. One, that's dependent, and I think this is one of the things that's actually blocking deployment, getting to the point on computer use where the models are really masters at using the computer, right? And, we've seen this climb in benchmarks, and benchmarks are always, imperfect measures, but like, OS World is, went from, like 5%, I think when we first released, computer use like a year and a quarter ago, it was like maybe 15%. I don't remember exactly, but we've climbed from that to like 65 or 70%. And there may be harder measures as well, but I think computer use has to pass a point of reliability.
1 000 000 tokenów to tygodnie ludzkiej nauki w sekundę. W tradycyjnym modelu nauki człowiek potrzebuje tygodni, by przyswoić wiedzę zawartą w milionie słów. Sztuczna inteligencja robi to w ułamku sekundy. Ale prawdziwy przełom nastąpi, gdy systemy zaczną uczyć się w biegu, podczas wykonywania zadania.
I would describe as kind of like human on the job learning, but like a little weaker and a little short term. Like you look at in context learning, you give the model a bunch of examples, it does get it. There's real learning that happens in context, and like 1 million tokens is a lot. That's that can be days of human learning, right? If you think about the model, kind of reading 1 million words, it takes me, how long would it take me to read 1 million? I mean, like days or weeks at least. So you have these two things, and I think these two things within the existing paradigm may just be enough to get you the country of geniuses in a data center. I don't know for sure, but I think they're going to get you a large fraction of it. There may be gaps, but I certainly think just as things are, this, I believe, is enough to generate trillions of dollars of revenue. That's one. That's all one. Two is this idea of continual learning, this idea of a single model learning on the job. I think we're working on that too. And I think there's a good chance that in the next year or two, we also solve that. I think you get most of the way there without it. I think the trillions of dollars I think the trillions of dollars a year market, maybe all of the national security implications and the safety implications that I wrote about in Adolescence of Technology can happen without it. But I also think we, and I imagine others, are working on it. And I think there's a good chance that we get there within the next year or two. There are a bunch of ideas. I won't go into all of them in detail, but one is just make the context longer. There's nothing preventing longer context from working. You just have to train at longer context and then learn to serve them at inference. And both of those are engineering problems that we are working on and that I would assume others are working on as well.
Nadzór AI. Wolność w czasach bioterroryzmu. Potęga niesie ze sobą zagrożenia, o których wcześniej czytaliśmy tylko w powieściach science fiction. Amodei kreśli wizję konieczności stworzenia globalnego systemu monitoringu opartego na sztucznej inteligencji, który musi pogodzić ochronę przed nowymi zagrożeniami z zachowaniem naszych podstawowych wolności obywatelskich.
I think in the long run we need some architecture of governance, right? Some architecture of governance that preserves human freedom, but kind of also allows us to govern the very large number of kind of human systems, AI systems, hybrid human hybrid human AI, companies or like economic units. So we're going to need to think about how do we protect the world against bioterrorism? How do we protect the world against mirror life? Probably we're going to need some kind of AI monitoring system that kind of monitors for all of these things. But then we need to build this in a way that preserves civil liberties and our constitutional rights. So I think just as is anything else, it's like a new security landscape with a new set of tools and a new set of vulnerabilities.
Najważniejsze decyzje ludzkości zapadają w 2 minuty. Gdy przyszli historycy będą opisywać wyścig zbrojeń sztucznej inteligencji, mogą pominąć to, co najbardziej przerażające – tempo i chaos. Amodei szczerze przyznaje, że w samym sercu technologicznej rewolucji decyzje o skali globalnej często podejmuje się między jednym spotkaniem a drugim, walcząc z czasem, którego nikt już nie ma pod dostatkiem.
When somebody eventually writes the equivalent of the making of the atomic bomb for this era, what is the thing that will be hardest to glean from the historical record that they're most likely to miss?
I think a few things. One is, at every moment of this exponential, the extent to which the world outside it didn't understand it. This is a bias that's often present in history, where anything that actually happened looks inevitable in retrospect. And so, I think when people look back, it will be hard for them to put themselves in the place of people who were actually making a bet on this thing to happen that wasn't inevitable, that we had these arguments, like the arguments that, that I make for scaling, or that continual learning will be solved. Some of us internally in our heads put a high probability on this happening, but it's like there's a world outside us that's not acting on that's not kind of not acting on that at all. And I think the weirdness of it. I think unfortunately, the insularity of it, if we're 1 year or 2 years away from it happening, the average person on the street has no idea. And that's one of the things I'm trying to change, with the memos, with talking to policymakers. But I don't know. I think that's just a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Finally, I would say, and this probably applies to almost all historical moments of crisis, how absolutely fast it was happening, how everything was happening all at once. And so decisions that you might think, were kind of carefully calculated, well, actually you have to make that decision, and then you have to make 30 other decisions on the same day, because it's all happening so fast. And you don't even know which decisions are going to turn out to be consequential. So, one of my, I guess, worries, although it's also an insight into kind of what's happening, is that, some very critical decision will be some decision that, someone just comes into my office and is like, Dario, you have 2 minutes. Should we do thing A or thing B on this? Someone gives me this random, half page memo and is like, should we do A or B? And I'm like, I don't know, I have to eat lunch. Let's do B. And that ends up being the most consequential thing ever.
W pominiętych fragmentach rozmowa zeszła z efektownych przykładów na fundamenty. Co naprawdę rośnie wraz ze skalą. Nie chodziło tylko o modele językowe, ale też o uczenie ze wzmocnieniem i długie sekwencje działań, gdzie więcej treningu zaczyna przekładać się na więcej kompetencji. Padło też ważne rozróżnienie. Trening jest niewiarygodnie kosztowny i nieoszczędny, ale po treningu system potrafi adaptować się w ramach kontekstu, jakby uczył się w locie. Gdy weszli w temat milionowych okien kontekstu, wybrzmiała prosta prawda. To w dużej mierze inżynieria, pamięć, koszty inferencji i twarda logistyka obliczeń. Potem rozmowa dotknęła realnego hamulca przyszłości – wdrożeń. Możliwości modeli rosną szybko, ale dyfuzja do gospodarki jest wolniejsza, bo wchodzi prawo, bezpieczeństwo, procedury i odpowiedzialność. I na końcu ciężar przeszedł na etykę i geopolitykę. Kto będzie kontrolował tę moc? Jak uniknąć wyścigu zbrojeń i jak nie dopuścić do świata, w którym sztuczna inteligencja służy bardziej kontroli niż ludziom? Świat sztucznej inteligencji pędzi tak szybko, że łatwo się w nim zgubić. Jeśli cenicie moje materiały tutaj i na Instagramie, zajrzyjcie do opisu. Czeka tam link do Patronite. Możecie wesprzeć ten kanał już od 10 zł, a ponieważ każdy próg daje to samo, sami decydujecie o kwocie. W zamian zapraszam Was na mój zamknięty serwer na Discordzie. To takie nasze wspólne, ludzkie centrum dowodzenia, z nowinkami, chociażby o przełomach AI w medycynie. Dodatkowo Wasz nick zawsze ląduje w napisach końcowych. A teraz przejdziemy do kolejnej rozmowy, gdzie zanurzymy się w umysły wizjonerów, którzy twierdzą, że świat jaki znamy właśnie przestaje istnieć. Peter Diamandis i Salim Ismail, architekci myślenia wykładniczego, kreślą wizję przyszłości, w której tradycyjne struktury społeczne i biznesowe rozpadają się pod naporem sztucznej inteligencji. To nie jest kolejna opowieść o chatbotach. To analiza momentu, w którym tempo zmian przekracza granice ludzkiej percepcji. Stajemy przed fundamentalnym pytaniem. Co zrobimy, gdy modele AI zaczną pisać własny kod, a tradycyjny rynek pracy wyparuje w ciągu jednej nocy? Przed nami brutalna prawda o końcu prywatności, erze AI, CO i technologii, która może dać nam nieśmiertelność, o ile tylko zdołamy przetrwać nadchodzący wstrząs. Przygotujcie się na głęboką analizę osobliwości, która dzieje się tu i teraz. Koniec ludzkiego zarządzania. Nadchodzi era AI CEO. Tradycyjne korporacje przez dekady opierały się na stabilnych, wieloletnich strategiach. Jednak w świecie AGI czas ulega kompresji. To, co dawniej trwało lata, teraz dzieje się w milisekundy, sprawiając, że ludzki mózg staje się wąskim gardłem w procesie decyzyjnym.
If you look at banks and insurance companies and, practically anything, it doesn't change strategy more than once a decade, or once every millennium. Now, in the age of AGI, the course corrections are going to be, it'll go from decades to years to months to weeks to minutes, all in the
100%.
next couple of years.
We have
quickly.
We have a whole section in the first EXO book called Death to the 5-Year Plan, right? Because today, by the time you finished your 5-year plan, it's out of date. Then you spend all your time maintaining the plan.
Exactly.
Alex.
And so the amount of information that you need to assimilate to do those course corrections is beyond human. There's just so much going on. If you read Alex's daily feed, the amount of change going on, if you compare it day over day, you can see the expansion of the rate. And so it's just so much happening. It's beyond human assimilation at some point. So you have to have an AI CEO to assimilate it and even suggest the course corrections.
Rekurencyjna samonaprawa. Ostatnie okno otwartego dostępu. Przechodzimy od modeli uczonych przez ludzi do systemów, które same piszą swój kod źródłowy. Ta ewolucja może sprawić, że najpotężniejsza technologia w historii świata wkrótce zgaśnie dla opinii publicznej, stając się pilnie strzeżonym sekretem korporacyjnych zbrojeń.
So we moved to the era of reasoning models when it was possible through a process that used to be called iterated amplification and distillation to take a pre-trained base model or baseline model and then cyclically generate a bunch of training data and distill from that to a child model and repeat the process over and over again. And that post-training revolution for reasoning models was much faster. Like it's much faster to post-train a model off of a corpus of synthetic data, and so release cycles contracted. And I think now we're on the edge, probably slightly past the edge at this point, of a new era, call it the recursive self-improvement era, where the models are starting to rewrite their own code. It's not just a matter of a model, a parent or teacher model generating synthetic training data that's used for a child distillee model. It's literally the parent is writing the code for the child. And that can be done even more quickly than just post-training. And I think it's just going to get faster and faster until it's a continuum.
Yeah, no, it's going to accelerate like crazy. But also we're in a window of time, a very narrow window of time right now where the very best technology is available to you. Like Claude gives you their absolute best 4.6 and OpenAI does and Gemini does. I would not count on that surviving post the self-improvement era. Right now also the Chinese open source models are pretty much right on par with the best of the best. They're slipping a little bit. But I think the window of opportunity to take advantage of that and build something out of it is right here, right now. I really doubt 2 years from now that the best AI is going to be just log in and go. Here, you can have free access to it. And what'll happen is you'll be deprived of it with the excuse being security and safety.
Interesting.
Which is true. I mean, it's pretty hard to deny. But you have a window of opportunity right now to be on the very cutting edge. If you don't take advantage of it now and get somewhere with it right now, I wouldn't count on that existing.
So the models are going to go
years from
dark, right? It's the secret sauce is going to be kept internal to benefit those companies as they go into an all-out battle.
Well, and even today, if you talk to Noam Brown over at OpenAI, he's working on the next generation internally, but it's only like 3 months in the future that, he has access to. But 3 months in the future in the era of self-improvement is like, massively different intelligence level. The definition of 3 months of AI development, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and today, that's the point of the slide, I guess. It's like 3 months is like a lifetime of difference in capability that they're using internally versus what's, available in the outside world. So you got to expect that it's now or never to react, basically. And people are still hugely underreacting to the importance of what's happening right now.
Dobrowolna inwigilacja w zamian za cyfrowy geniusz. Wizja osobistego asystenta, który słyszy i widzi wszystko, co my, budzi lęk o prywatność. Jednak korzyści z posiadania zewnętrznego płata czołowego mogą okazać się tak gigantyczne, że rezygnacja z AI będzie odczuwalna jak dobrowolna lobotomia.
Just a comment.
Peter, how many times have you asked for Jarvis? You got Jarvis. Christmas came early.
Yeah, I named my Claudebot Jarvis initially. I said that's just too generic. I love Jarvis. I write about Jarvis in all my books as sort of the ideal AI analog, but Skippy is a more unique name for me. It really is here, and now all of a sudden, besides it's going to take in all imagery. It's going to be taking in all audio, listening to your conversations always. And people say, well, I don't want to lose privacy to my AI. Well, guess what? You're going to give AI access to all of everything you're seeing, everything it's hearing, every conversation, every email, because when you do that, the value creation in your life is so great that not doing that is going to feel like you've ripped away all of your mental capabilities.
Koniec ery konsumpcji. Twórz albo zostaniesz zmiażdżony. Granica między twórcą a odbiorcą ostatecznie się zaciera, redefiniując fundamenty naszej gospodarki i tożsamości zawodowej. W świecie, gdzie algorytmy z łatwością przyjmują rutynowe zadania, jedyną bezpieczną przystanią staje się kreatywność wspierana przez sztuczną inteligencję. To już nie jest wybór hobbystyczny, to brutalna strategia przetrwania na rynku, który przestaje oferować miejsce dla biernych obserwatorów i tradycyjnych pracowników etatowych.
Everybody listening, please become a creator and not just a consumer, right? The future is for all of us to be creators. And AI is your means by which you learn anything you want. And it's, a lot of people have fear about saying, I don't know how to do it. I've never played with this before. Just go to, to 4.6, go to Gemini 3 Pro, whatever your favorite LLM is, and have a conversation. Say, I want to start. Where can I start? What do I do?
Yep.
Step by step, feed it to me, and it will.
It's fun, too. There's nothing to fear there at all. It's genuinely incredibly fun from the first minute. So there's and I'll give you the flip side of this, too. If you don't do what Peter just said, when you see the next couple of slides on job loss coming up, you are going to be crushed if you're not part of this. Unless you're a really good electrician or a really good salesperson, you're probably immune. Or you work for the government.
There's two roles in the future.
You're probably
there's
immune.
two roles in the future. There's the entrepreneur and there's the employee, and one of those will not exist.
Yeah, there you go.
And there's the creator and the consumer, right? I can't I keep on telling my kids this every single day. Instead of consuming YouTube videos and video games, please start creating. What do you dream about? The future right now, we're seeing this play out. We talked about it, Dave, on our pod with Elon, where these AI models are going to deliver you. What video game do you dream about having? What changes would you like to Minecraft or Valorant or whatever you're playing? And then you can have your AI spin it up and create your own version of it instantly.
AI przyspiesza, ludzie tracą pracę, a system je nadąża. Statystyki nie kłamią. Rynek pracy zaczyna reagować na efektywność sztucznej inteligencji masowymi zwolnieniami, podczas gdy instytucje państwowe zdają się nie zauważać skali problemu. Stoimy przed ryzykiem zerwania kontraktu społecznego w momencie, gdy produktywność jednostki rośnie 10-krotnie, czyniąc miliony pracowników zbędnymi.
We're going to dive into a single slide on the economy that's important here, telling part of the accelerating story here. So U.S. jobs disappear at the fastest rate this January since the Great Recession. Here are the numbers. So job cuts. So there was 108,000 job cuts in January of 2026, up 118% from January 2025. So a little more than a doubling in job cuts year on year for the month of January. At the same time, hiring is the lowest this past month since 2009. Amazon alone laid off 16,000 corporate employees, and UPS eliminated 30,000 jobs. Why are we bringing this up? Just for, to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening to the economy, and just raising the point for everybody listening. Your goal is not to be an employee. Your goal is to find something you're amazing at, that you love doing, that you can add value, and sort of creating your own job capability, becoming an entrepreneur, using AI to enable yourself. Salim, you want to jump in on this?
I think the danger here is not really unemployment, but it's like disbelief from our institutions. I feel like this is not really a recession. It's literally tasks being evaporated in front of our eyes. So the long-term consequences of this are pretty huge. We can literally, for me, this is the social contract, little by little, it disappearing and pixelating away.
Dave?
Yeah, this is going to be really, really bad. I mean, really bad. And Elon said it when we met him, and we met with the governor, and it's like just nobody's preparing. Because what we all know, there'll be UBI at the end of this cycle, and we also know there'll be abundance and massively more opportunity than job loss. But that's after, like, all the corporate CEOs I know, including our own companies, are going to use AI to cut costs by 30 to 50%. And when you sample a random person in their job and you say, hey, here's your job without AI, here's your job using AI, they're looking at 3 to 10x productivity increase. And you're like, wow, that's great for that person. And then the other 7 or 9, what happened to them? And they will eventually be enabled, but there's this huge trough between today and that day. And we can make that trough much shorter and make that pain a lot less painful with a plan.
Wojna o własność intelektualną pracy. Kluczowe pytanie przyszłości nie brzmi, czy AI wykona Twoją pracę, ale kto będzie właścicielem tej sztucznej inteligencji. To fundamentalny konflikt między pracownikiem, który chce zyskać wolność dzięki automatyzacji, a firmą, która chce zredukować koszty, eliminując człowieka z równania.
Distinction I want to make here to help people understand where their roles are going and the idea of job loss and universal high income. And it's an example that it was meaningful to me. So here's a scenario. If you're an employee for a company and you're delivering some kind of a cognitive labor, and in one scenario, you're able to spin up an amazing AI that can do your job for you. And it goes and delivers the service to the company you're employed by. And it does a job 10 times better than you could do. But you're earning the revenue from that as the employee because your AI is delivering that service. You're at home, you're working out, you're sleeping better, you're spending more time with your family, and your AI is generating more and more revenue on your behalf. That's one scenario. The flip side of the scenario is no. The company builds that AI that does your job for you, and it fires you, and it's making more money, right? So it's going to be this tension between these two scenarios that's important to watch and see how it plays out. And I think government policy is going to play a role here. This is about the idea of universal basic income or universal high income. Where does the added value creation end up living? Is it with the employees, with the company? And these are the conversations that need to happen right now.
Krioprezerwacja jako plan B dla pokolenia osobliwości. Jeśli postęp technologiczny zmierza do pokonania starości, największym ryzykiem staje się przypadkowa śmierć tuż przed metą. Biofizyka i nowe metody ochrony synaps sprawiają, że kriogenika przestaje być science fiction, a staje się racjonalnym portfelem ubezpieczeniowym na czas transformacji gatunku.
One particular article in the biotech realm, I know one that Alex and I are both excited about. Research achieved protection of brain's synapses at cryogenic temperatures. I'll hand it to you in a second, Alex. I mean, here's the question. If you could freeze yourself, either because you've got a medical condition that isn't yet cured, that is likely to be cured in a decade, and you're on the verge of death, could you freeze yourself and then unfreeze yourself and be able to, benefit from all the breakthroughs that occurred in the last decade? At the second time, if you want to time hop, I want to see what it's like after the singularity. I want to be around when LEV, longevity escape velocity, has been achieved. Can you freeze yourself? Well, the challenge has been when you do that, ice crystals form, and because ice volumetrically expands compared to the rest of the cellular fluid, it can disrupt and break the synapses that are the interconnections, effectively the stored memories in your brain. But this came out and gives us hope. Alex, over to you.
This is a key advance that many in the field of cryonics have been waiting for. This is a result out of 21st Century Medicine, a startup that's focusing on reversible cryopreservation technologies. It works with the Alcor Foundation, which is in America the premier nonprofit that focuses on offering cryopreservation services. I would say parenthetically to the audience, if ever you've expressed interest or had interest in cryopreservation, cryonics, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to Alcor and see whether it's right to you. I don't have a financial stake, but I just scratch my head wondering why. I have to be careful with what I say. I will say publicly I'm a huge supporter of Alcor and cryonics. Very big supporter.
I've never signed up for it because I didn't want to have a plan B. I wanted to make sure I'm focused on longevity. But as this technology matures, it becomes really, a backup plan. As Ray said, as Ray Kurzweil said on this pod, it's maybe plan C or D.
I think it's such an important part of a portfolio approach to the singularity. So if one could maybe quibble over what the right sequencing is, like should plan A be live long enough to live forever, and then plan B is uploading and plan C is cryonics or vice versa. I'm not sure it matters a huge amount, but I would think anyone who's truly serious about acceleration and taking advantage of the acceleration. If you get hit by a bus tomorrow, then you're out of luck superficially in terms of taking advantage of the post-singular abundant worlds that we talk about on this podcast every episode. Why not avail yourself of cryonics as one asset in your live long enough to live forever portfolio? It's a huge head scratcher for me.
Well, a couple of fun facts for anyone who's a doubter on this. There are species of fish and frogs that freeze rock solid in a block of ice all winter and then thaw out in the spring, and they're absolutely fine because their cell walls don't rupture because they have enough glucose or whatever inside the cytoplasm of the cells. So it's not far-fetched at all. Also, we've frozen egg cells and embryos, extracted the nucleus, and it's fine for mammals, for actual mammals. So
we do this for IVF, right? If you do IVF, you typically will fertilize and freeze a number of eggs, and then you can defrost them, and they're fine. So it's at scale, and as you said, not disrupting the cell membrane.
We do it all the time for individual cells. We're doing it increasingly for tissue. Blood, if we could reversibly cryopreserve blood, we wouldn't need local markets for blood transfusion. We could just have one large national market. Similarly, for organ preservation, organ cryopreservation is an enormous problem. We wouldn't need all of these hyperlocal state markets for organs.
W pominiętych fragmentach rozmowa zeszła z wizji na twarde zasady gry. Odpowiedzialność, prywatność, bezpieczeństwo i prawo. Padło, że sztuczna inteligencja coraz częściej współprowadzi decyzje, bo widzi organizację w skali danych, której człowiek nie ogarnie. A to od razu rodzi pytania o zgodę, audyt i to, kto odpowie za błąd. Pojawił się też wątek AI CEO, czyli sytuacji, w której technologia realnie steruje procesami, a człowiek bywa formalną twarzą, bo tak wymaga system prawny. Do tego agenci z oczami, okulary, asystenci działający w waszym imieniu i ostrzeżenie. Integracje i umiejętności mogą być skażone, więc bezpieczeństwo musi być standardem, nie dodatkiem. Finał dotknął infrastruktury i napięć społecznych. Energia, centra danych, regulacje, presja. A sedno jest jedno. Czy zdążymy z zasadami, zanim tempo zmian nas przegoni? A teraz przejdziemy do ostatniej rozmowy na dzisiaj. Większość z nas postrzega przyszłość jako prostą kontynuację przeszłości. Spodziewamy się, że nadchodzące dekady przyniosą nam lepsze smartfony, szybsze komputery i nieco sprawniejszą automatyzację. Jednak Ajeya Cotra, czołowa analityczka badająca osie czasu rozwoju sztucznej inteligencji, ostrzega: nasza intuicja nas zawodzi. Stoimy u progu zjawiska, które nie jest kolejną rewolucją przemysłową, lecz cywilizacyjnym zerwaniem ciągłości. W dzisiejszym materiale przeanalizujemy wizję świata, w którym sztuczna inteligencja przestaje być narzędziem, a staje się autonomicznym silnikiem postępu, zdolnym do zreplikowania 10 000 lat ludzkiego rozwoju w zaledwie ćwierć wieku. Czy jako ludzkość jesteśmy gotowi na moment, w którym maszyny zaczną projektować same siebie, a my stracimy monopol na bycie najbardziej kompetentną formą inteligencji na planecie? Przyjrzyjmy się faktom, które redefiniują pojęcie przyszłości. Koniec ery postępu liniowego. 10 000 lat do 2050 roku. Ludzki mózg ewolucyjnie nie radzi sobie z rozumieniem wykładniczego wzrostu. Zakładamy, że rok 2050 będzie różnił się od dzisiejszego, tak jak rok 2025 różni się od roku 2000. Ajeya Cotra uważa jednak, że prawdziwa skala zmian, jakie przyniesie AGI, całkowicie zburzy ten spokój, przenosząc nas w realia, które dziś uznalibyśmy za science fiction.
And so I think there's this expectation where whether or not we get AGI in the next few years, a lot of people are starting to not really care about that question. They still expect the next 25 years and the next 50 years to play out kind of like the last 25 years or the last 50 years where, there's a lot of technological change between 2000 and 2025. But it's a moderate amount of change. And they kind of expect that in 2050, there will be a similar amount of change as there was between 2000 and 2025. Even if they think that we're going to get AGI in 2030. They think AGI is just what's going to drive that sort of continued mild improvement. Whereas I think that there's a pretty good chance that by 2050, the world will look as different from today as today does from the hunter-gatherer era. It's 10,000 years of progress rather than 25 years of progress, driven by AI automating all intellectual activity.
Closing the loop. AI przejmuje kontrolę nad materią. Prawdziwy przełom nastąpi w momencie, gdy sztuczna inteligencja wyjdzie poza ramy cyfrowe i zyska sprawczość w świecie fizycznym. Jeśli maszyny zdominują ekspercką wiedzę z zakresu wirusologii czy inżynierii, kolejnym logicznym krokiem będzie zautomatyzowanie fabryk produkujących ich własne procesory. To moment, w którym pętla rozwoju zostanie domknięta bez udziału człowieka.
It's quite interesting that I guess, people who radically differ in their policy prescriptions might be targeting, aiming for the same level of speed, actually. Maybe they wanted this period to take 10 years or 20 years. That's what both of them want, but they just think it's their baseline is so different, so they're pushing in completely opposite directions. What's your kind of modal expectation? What do you think is the most likely impact for it to have?
I think that probably in the early 2030s, we are going to see what Ryan Greenblatt calls top human expert dominating AI, which is an AI system that can do tasks that you can do remotely from a computer better than any human expert. So it's better at remote virology tasks than the best virologists, better at remote, software engineering tasks than the best software engineers, and so on for all the different domains. And by that time, I feel like probably the world has already accelerated and changed. And sort of narrower and weaker AI systems have already penetrated in a bunch of places, and we're looking at a pretty different world. But at that point, I think things can go much, much faster because I think at top human expert dominating AIs in the cognitive domain could probably use human physical labor to build like robotic physical actuators for themselves. That would be like one of the things that whether the AIs are sort of have already taken over and are acting on their own, or whether like humans are still in control of the AIs, I think that would be a goal they would have of like automating the physical as well. And I think I have pretty wide uncertainty on like exactly how hard that'll be. But whenever I check in on the field of robotics, I actually feel like robotics is like progressing pretty quickly. And it's taking off for the same reasons that sort of cognitive AI is taking off. It's like large models, lots of data, imitation, large scale is helping robotics a lot. So I imagine that like you can pretty quickly, maybe within a year, maybe within a couple years, get to the point where these like superhuman AIs are controlling a bunch of physical actuators that allow them to sort of close the loop of like making more of themselves, like doing all the work required to like run the factories that like print out the chips that then run the AIs and like doing all the repair work on that and like gathering the raw materials on that.
Wyścig z czasem. 18 miesięcy na uratowanie przyszłości. Gdy sztuczna inteligencja zacznie samodzielnie prowadzić badania nad własnym rozwojem, tempo innowacji wystrzeli w sposób niekontrolowany. Stoimy przed krytycznym dylematem. Czy w obliczu eksplozji inteligencji potrafimy porzucić rynkową rywalizację i przekierować całą moc obliczeniową na mechanizmy obronne, zanim technologia zyska status boski? To może być najkrótsze i najważniejsze okno decyzyjne w historii naszego gatunku.
So let's imagine that via whatever mechanism society does get a heads up that we are starting to see the early stages of an intelligence explosion. What would we do with that heads up?
Yeah, so I think one just extremely important factor is at that point in time, how good are AI systems at everything besides AI R&D? So the alarm has sounded, and AI, we learned that AI has like fully or almost fully automated R&D at the leading AI lab, perhaps all the AI labs. This is causing those labs to go way faster than they were going with like mostly human-driven progress in the previous era. So at that point in time, whatever AI progress you thought was going to be made by default in the next 10 years or the next 20 years or the next 30 years might be made in a year or two or even 6 months based on how much, depending on how much AI is speeding everything up. So, you know, at this stage, AIs might not be that dangerous, but we might be about to move very quickly through the point in time where they're not so dangerous to the point in time where they have, you know, sort of godlike abilities. And I think that what we want to do as a society, if we gain confidence that we're sort of at the starting point of this intelligence explosion, is to redirect as much of that AI labor as we can from further AI R&D to things that could help protect us from future generations of AIs, both in terms of AI takeover risk and also in terms of a wide range of other problems that might be created for society by increasingly powerful AI. And at that point, it's still not in the sort of narrow selfish interests of whichever company is in the lead to do that, because if they were to slow down unilaterally, then like someone behind them could catch up. But hopefully, if the alarm has sounded and we have like a clear picture of, you know, we have 6 months or 12 months or 18 months until radical superintelligence, then this might be like a window of opportunity to coordinate to get to like use AIs for protective activities instead of further AI capability acceleration.
W wyciętych fragmentach rozmowy zeszli z poziomu, czy sztuczna inteligencja będzie potężna, na poziom, jak szybko zamknie pętlę postępu. Padło, że benchmarki potrafią mylić, bo świat poza testem jest chaotyczny, więc liczy się empiryka, realne pomiary produktywności i wpływu AI na badania oraz rozwój. Pojawił się też wątek ryzyka cichej przewagi, gdy najlepsze systemy działają wewnątrz firm, a reszta świata widzi je dopiero, gdy jest za późno. Dlatego tak ważne są transparentność, raportowanie użycia i sygnały ostrzegawcze. Najcięższa część dotyczyła etyki i prawa. Sama władza państwowa nie wystarczy bez wiedzy publicznej i kontroli społecznej. A w tle wybrzmiał crunch time. Jeśli sztuczna inteligencja zacznie się automatyzować, okno reakcji może być krótkie, nawet około roku. Rozwiązaniem ma być użycie AI do obrony i mądre sterowanie tempem, zanim przyspieszenie wyrwie się spod kontroli.